Morning, everybody. It's Friday, and I want to go back to Luke 16 and talk a little bit more about the shrewd manager, tied in with some other examples to just get us thinking some more about that. So, the shrewd manager in chapter 16, Luke 16, is the story Jesus tells of a man who is an administrator, a manager, kind of an accountant type guy, and he's called the shrewd manager because he's smart in how he acts, but he's also dishonest. Um, and we saw on Wednesday that this man has five capitals that are represented here. I think I might have only mentioned four, but we see it in chapter 16. He's about to get fired, so the manager said to himself, "What shall I do now? My master's taking away my job." That's financial capital. I'm not strong enough to dig, right? He's not strong. He doesn't have a lot of physical capital or physical ability. And I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, right? I know what I'll do. He has an idea, intellectual capital, creative ideas. That's what this guy was very high on intellectual capital. So that when I lose my job here, I'll be welcomed into others' homes and they'll receive me. Relational capital. So he's going to use his idea to build relational capital, so that through the relational capital, he'll be able to get work and have financial capital again. And then Jesus says, see, this guy was shrewd and he knew what he needed to do in order to get a job and not lose that financial capital that he needed. And then Jesus says, in the same way, we should be doing all that we can, investing our capital to gain spiritual capital, not just worldly wealth, but spiritual, eternal wealth. And in the book Economics, it gives some examples. Like, think about it. When would you rather have a teacher who is rich or who has knowledge, who is high in and rich in intellectual capital? He gives an example, of parents. Would you rather have parents who are wealthy or who love you or who are present? And there are many stories that get repeated of we get a job opportunity, promotion, and we've got to move across. Maybe we move, maybe we don't, but sometimes again we have to uproot and go to a new place with a new job and new opportunities. And then what happens is that great job with that great salary ends up keeping us away. We're working longer, we're working on the weekends, we're not around family and our friends, or they don't see us as much anymore. So we make all of those sacrifices or investments for the financial capital that it will bring, but at the sacrifice of our relational capital with our family, perhaps. So I want to go to Daniel, because in the book of Daniel, we see an example that I think really applies to us right now through what we're going through. So in Daniel chapter 1, Daniel is a young man who was taken captive to Babylon. And it says in verse 6, chapter 1, verse 6, among those who had been chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. Daniel, the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. So these young men, these four young men, are being brought to Babylon, and they're being now made eunuchs. They're being castrated, and they're going to serve in the king's house, in the king's palace. So these were the young guys being brought from Judah to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar. And Nebuchadnezzar now is going to prepare them to serve in his palace. So they've got to learn. So they're going to invest. Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon is going to invest heavily in these young men to educate them in the Babylonian customs, to educate them in how to serve before the king, how to dress. At the end of it, you can think, okay, they're not going to even remember where they came from or their ways or their gods, right? They're going to teach them about the Babylonian language. They're giving them Babylonian names. They're giving them the king's food. They're going to be able to eat from the king's table and the king's food and wear clothes provided by the king. So the king is highly investing in them. But then it says in verse 8, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. So he's saying, um, he's valuing his spiritual capital, right? So this young man is saying, if I do this, I will defile myself. I will be disobeying what the Lord has commanded me as a Jew to practice, even in the dietary guidelines. And he's not willing to sacrifice his spiritual capital to eat all of this food that's coming from the king's table. So he doesn't want to. He values his spiritual capital, so he asked for permission to not have to eat that stuff and defile himself. Verse 9, now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. Okay, so he is investing in God. He's trusting in God. Um, and God is now answering, right? He's leveraged his spiritual capital with the Father, and the Father is now responding and giving him favor with this guy, the official. The official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord, the king, who has assigned you food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men of your age? The king would then have my head because of you. And Daniel said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance to that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate of the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine that they were to drink, and gave them vegetables instead. So God gave these four young men knowledge, understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. So they ended up they leveraged their spiritual capital. They invested in spiritual capital. And then God gave them intellectual capital greater than others around them. So that then gave them favor. But here's the point. So we see an example of Daniel investing in spiritual capital, and then the payoff that he gets from that. He gets a return of intellectual capital given by the Father. But here's another connection I want us to see. Daniel was in a foreign land. He was far from Jerusalem. He was in servitude, right, to Nebuchadnezzar. So he had no temple to go to. There weren't priests that he could go to. So Daniel is away from his temple. He's not able to worship and according to the law. Yet Daniel's spiritual capital grew during this time. And we're at least 6 weeks, 7 weeks into not being able to meet together. We're not being able to go to church and gather together and have Bible studies together. But and for many, because most of the people in Daniel's time, they didn't grow spiritually. But Daniel and his friends were the exception. They were pursuing God. They didn't let their circumstances um, take away their spiritual capital and their relationship with God. So here's the challenge. How did they do it? Well, they decided to not nourish their bodies with things that God had told them not to eat, physical things. Well, what are the things that, and they nourish their soul by praying and trusting God. So what are the things that you are using to nourish your heart and your soul during this quarantine? What are the things that's filling your time? There's so many things that, just like with Daniel, there's so many things, man. The food, everything that the king was giving to him, but they said, we won't touch it. Well, what all the things that are out there on Netflix and streaming videos and Facebook and TikTok videos, which are fun, but man, you realize how much time and the stuff that you're looking at, is it nourishing your soul? Are you developing spiritual capital with the Father and getting deeper with the Father during this quarantine, this time out, so that when we come back, we're even stronger in our faith? So think about that today. What are the things that fill your time during the day, and allow priorities or changes that need to occur, and test. test it, test the Lord. Take a day and nourish yourself more with the God's nourishment instead of the other, and see if it doesn't make a difference in your life. If, like Daniel, you're not glowing, you're not, it's not evident that your spirit is being nourished and growing in your spiritual capital. So God bless you, and I'll see everyone on Monday with a new devotional. God bless.